Hare Krishna. Question from Shantipur Prabhu. I was talking with a Christian missionary, and when I told him about how Christians should not eat meat because the Ten Commandments include thou shalt not kill, he said that this is a out of context usage of the commandment, because the commandment is a prescription for not killing unnecessarily. But in the Bible there is also the concept of a righteous war in which even human beings can be killed, and the Old Testament is filled with incidents of righteous war which are glorified in the Bible. So thou shalt not kill does not even apply as a blanket statement to all human beings. Then what to speak of to animals? So is Prabhupada's application of it to stop against animal slaughter a misapplication? Answer: in every religious tradition there is a statement of this. There are scriptural statements, and there are ways in which that statement has been understood within that tradition, and these two are not always the same. So the very first principle is, if Prabhupada never claimed to be a biblical scholar who was going to argue based on biblical scholarship about any of the principles of living. Sometimes when some Christian pastors came and then devotees tried to argue based on the Bible, some devotees tried to argue with them based on the Bible, Prabhupada said, don't get involved in that. Bible is their book and we can't interpret it for them. So Prabhupada did not get into that zone too much. Now what does this mean when we say he did not get into, he never claimed to be a biblical scholar, and he did not he did not try also to base his discussions as a biblical scholar. So it's not a matter of scriptural technicality over here that Prabhupada is talking about. So if we look at the literal wording of the statement, thou shalt not kill, it does include sanctification of life, recognition of the sanctity of life, and therefore a recognition that life should not be taken away. Now, although within the Christian tradition there are, so that is the literal statement is, Prabhupada is not going into biblical technicalities. Prabhupada is simply talking in terms of a literal statement, that it is a statement, thou shalt not kill. That means it is recognizing the sanctity of life, and no one debates whether animals have life or not. They do have life, and taking away that life will involve killing. So without getting into technicalities, the literal wording of the statement is entirely compatible with what Srila Prabhupada explains. Now going from that literal wording to the way it has been understood within the biblical tradition. Now there are no Christians who will argue, or there is no biblical basis for arguing that one has to be a vegetarian to follow the Bible. Sorry, one has to be a non-vegetarian to follow the Bible. So certainly meat eating is not mandated in the Bible. So it's not necessary. That's the first point. So now within the tradition, in every scripture there are eternal principles, and there are contextual application of those principles. So when we look at the eternal principle, the broad teaching of Jesus was of acknowledging the value of life and of sacrifice, of compassion, of forgiveness. In fact, what is the cross or the crucifix on which Jesus was crucified symbolize? It symbolizes not causing violence, but even responding to violence with tolerance and forgiveness. So if we look at the broad Judeo-Christian ethos, it is an ethos of tolerance, of forgiveness. Jesus famously said that if somebody slaps you, turn the other cheek. So what does this mean? This means don't commit violence. So again, from the point of view of the tradition, it is not necessary to eat meat to follow the Bible. And if you look at the broad spirit of biblical teachings, then it is clear that the broad biblical teachings are in favor of non-violence, are in favor of tolerance, and definitely this applies to everything that is living, not just to human beings. Now, whether some Christians choose to apply it in a particular way and other Christians choose to apply it in a different way. So this application will depend on interpretation. But within the tradition, there is nothing necessary for to say that um, animals cannot be killed. That animals have to be killed for following the Bible and living as a Christian. And secondly, the overall spirit of Christian teachings as given by Christ are more in accord with ethos of non-violence, which would include non-violence towards animals. So now going further, if we look at the sixth commandment which is there, Satyaraj Prabhu, Stephen Rosen has written an article on this Prabhupada's sixth commandment, and he explains how there are abundant references in the Bible which talk about how one should live on grains. And right from the Old Testament, in Genesis itself, when the food is talked about, there is a reference that the grains and the plants are the food for the human beings. Their animals are not mentioned. So again, from the point of view of injunction for eating meat, there is no injunction that they have to eat meat, nor is there there is injunction when there is talking about food. There is no direct reference that one has to eat food, or one has to eat that among the foods that one should eat, there are fruit-bearing plants and grains that are mentioned, but meat is not mentioned in the Genesis verse. So overall, it is not exactly, not at all an out of context interpretation or misinterpretation that Srila Prabhupada is giving. Srila Prabhupada is giving a biblical foundation or a biblical basis for a universal human principle, which is very much in accordance with the overall teachings of Christianity as embodied through the example of Jesus. So now, as far as righteous violence is concerned, those are exceptions. So how often does the righteous war have to be fought, and especially how often does that apply for the life of a general citizen? It does not apply for the life of a general citizen because most citizens don't have to take up weapons and fight for themselves. So yes, there can be contextual exceptions, and that way the same with the scripture that ma himsayat sarva bhutani, this sort of general principle and exception is there in the Vedic tradition also. There is ma himsayat sarva bhutani, where it is said that don't harm any living being. At the same time, there is also the injunction that atataina, those are aggressors, can be killed. So there is the concept of righteous war within the Vedic tradition also, and the concept of righteous war has never been seen as a justification for violence against animals, brutality against animals. And going further, yes, in the Judeo-Christian tradition, often thou shalt not kill has not been applied to meat eating, and in general Christians have not necessarily followed like that, but there have been Christians who have been vegetarian, and especially the principle of being non-violent is something which is very much compatible with the overall Judeo-Christian ethos. And so if someone can recognize that broad principle which embodies the teachings of Jesus, then the person can see that actually vegetarianism is very much compatible with the overall teachings of Jesus. So if we are going to talk with Christians, we shouldn't at all talk with them in a way as if we know biblical scripture better than them. If we have a supercilious attitude, then then that will not go off well on them. Just like we would not like some Muslims or Christians to interpret the Vedic scriptures and tell us what they mean. So they have a full right to understand their scriptures, but we can talk about broad principles, which can be human principles, which can be spiritual principles, and which can be the spiritual teachings within the Bible. So Prabhupada did not just focus on that spiritual teachings within the Bible. He talked about a broad human principle of non-violence, which is also definitely overall incompatibility with the scriptural ethos of Christianity. Thank you. Hare Krishna.